then if she doesn't comply to it, then it's the writing's on the wall. It's a very clear indication that you're not dealing with somebody that you're dealing with a person that you will find it very difficult to create a healthy relationship with long term. Hello, hello, hello. I'm Dennis, the Married Man's Coach. I'm here to help you get more of what you want out of your marriage. So if you're a man and you're married and you want all the good things and less of the bad things, then subscribe and hit the bell icon. Today we're talking about what to do when your wife says she needs space. And the short answer is to give it to her, right? But how you do that is important. It's a Goldilocks situation. You don't want to give her too much space because that could potentially further whatever divide is going on for her. And you definitely don't want to give her too little space because then it'll just push her away faster. So first let's talk about why does she say this? Why is she saying she needs space? And so she says this because for whatever reason, warranted or not, she feels either unsafe around you or she feels deeply unattracted to you or maybe both. In a nutshell, she's got some sort of strong negative feeling highly associated with you. So in her mind, your presence means something bad. Now I say, so she feels that way, and it's warranted or not. It's either feelings, so it's not like there's some sort of objective measure to put this against, so that you can say right or wrong. It's not about that. So it doesn't mean she's right, doesn't mean she's wrong. It is what she's experiencing. And so those bad feelings have led her to spin a narrative in which the solution is less time with you. The solution is less time with you. And honestly, sometimes that's a healthy thing. I think all marriages need some sort of space at some point. Not obviously a lot of space for a long time, but a weekend away, that kind of thing. And so she's decided that she needs to get away from you and the marriage, and that means along the way, unfortunately, that you've dropped the ball. You've dropped the ball. Doesn't make it your fault, really. I don't think it's really good or useful to talk about things in terms of like, oh, it's his fault or whatever. But, on my channel, my life, my coaching programs, it's all about taking responsibility. What could you have done differently? Because no matter what's going on with your wife, somehow you helped make that. How could it be otherwise? How could it be otherwise? If you think it could be otherwise, I'd really love to hear about it. So leave a comment down below. And so you've either dropped the ball in terms of creating a space where she feels safe. So that could be physically safe. That's in our society, we don't really need to feel physically safe very often, depending on where you live. But if for some reason she no longer feels physically safe around you, either she feels that you might be aggressive, maybe your temper's gotten the best of you once or twice recently, or she kind of has this understanding that you might be aggressive to her. Doesn't mean it's right, again, but she has that feeling. And the other, or like the physical surroundings, she doesn't feel like you're capable to protect her. Like she feels for some reason that her surroundings are dangerous and you're not up to the job of taking care of her. Those are just a couple ways, primary ways, that she could feel unsafe in your presence. So that's one way you could have dropped the ball. The other way is that you've dropped the ball in the sense that she's not the kind of man, or you've no longer become the kind of man that she's attracted to, that she's drawn to. And if she doesn't feel safe around you, and that's because you're making her feel unsafe, not because there's some sort of external danger, then it can probably be boiled down to the fact that you're reacting rather than responding. That you're reacting rather than responding. So reactions are unconscious, they're unpredictable, and they're volatile. They're reactions. Responses are conscious, they're measured, and they're under your full control. And so widening the gap between whatever somebody, your wife, anybody, there's sort of external stimulus, a thing they say, a thing they do, and how you react to that, react or respond to that, is often the difference that makes the difference in terms of how you show up in a situation. So just a basic practice is to learn to be more comfortable with silence and your breathing. And I don't mean some sort of like hippy dippy, breathing routines or whatever, although honestly, there's probably nothing wrong with them. But just learning to take a deep breath before you decide what you're going to do is, honestly, sometimes I think that is one of the most important skills that I've ever learned in my life. One of the most useful skills that I've ever learned in my life. Just being able to like take a deep breath before I react or say or do anything has helped me to get away from reacting, kind of reacting in an angry way. That's how I would react, or maybe a hurt way, and then just responding in a way that I choose consciously. And so you need to get that space between whatever the stimulus is, words or actions, and your how you do what you do with those. And so the other way is that maybe you dropped the ball, that you're no longer the kind of man that she's drawn to. Again, comes back to attraction. I talk about it a lot on my channel because I think it's the glue. I think it's the glue. And a marriage can live without the glue, sometimes for a long time, but I can't recognize how that would be worthwhile or fun or useful or healthy for man or woman. So if she's not drawn to you, if she's not attracted to you, then you're probably suffering a death by 1,000 cuts. And the most basic thing here is your boundaries. A big part of being attractive is saying no. You're saying no. Hey, I'm not okay with that. You did this behavior. I'm not okay with it. You need to stop. And then being able to be the kind of guy who will hold the line, who will stick to that and broken record it as long as you need to until compliance happens. And that's as simple as it gets. A boundary. You say, hey, I didn't like it when you blah blah blah. Please stop. And you keep saying versions of that again and again and again until you get compliance. And if you don't ever get compliance, then the writing's on the wall about your marriage. Assuming that you're asking for, you're setting a boundary on something reasonable and healthy, like maybe poking you or calling you a name or, screaming at you at the top of her lungs because you left the cap off the toothpaste. Assuming you're setting a boundary for a reasonable reason, then if she doesn't comply to it, then it's the writing's on the wall. It's a very clear indication that you're not dealing with somebody that you're dealing with a person that you will find it very difficult to create a healthy relationship with long term. And that, notice how what I said about the boundary, right? Like, I'm starting with I. This is basic nonviolent communication stuff. You start by owning whatever's going on inside your body, and you should, because your wife can't make you feel anyway. Your boss can't make you feel anyway. They can do stuff, you can interpret in a way in order to arrive at a feeling, but they can't make you. So I feel angry when you shout at me, because of the toothpaste. I didn't put the stupid cap on the toothpaste. Please stop. So being able to set that boundary is really important in terms of being an attractive man or attractive person in general. And also, that's not just attractive, it's like healthy, having a healthy self-esteem. This is all necessary for that. And the reason this happens is because a lot of times guys are they just want everything to be peaceful, right? One of the masculine desires is that we want peace. We want order and we want peace. And sometimes we've gotten the idea, and I think we've gotten the idea because society has led us to the idea through TV, film, news, these kinds of things have all kind of instilled in us that classic masculinity is in general toxic, but it's not. But what happens is guys, they just want things to be peaceful and orderly, so they just say yes. Whatever happens, they will just do whatever they can to avoid a conflict because they recognize that conflict in the moment, and rightly so, will disrupt the peace. It will cause more chaos, and it will. And it's scary. It's scary because sometimes you don't know what the other person is going to do when you set a healthy boundary. Every single time you set a boundary, it risks the relationship, because you're on that dynamic of, well, I don't know what's gonna happen out of this. I don't know how this is gonna work out. And so one of the reasons she's no longer attracted to you because of this boundary issue is because she's lost respect for you. And of course, she's lost respect for you. How could she not? How could anyone not? If you allow anyone to do anything to you and you never stand up and say, that's enough, how could anybody have respect for that kind of person? I think it's difficult. So that's what you got to do. So you got to start setting. I mean, boundaries are often the first place to start, and you don't start a boundary with a big boundary. You start a boundary with you start setting boundaries with a very small one, and you do it in private, as in the only person involved in the conversation is you and your wife. Because the more eyes that you have watching, the more ears you have listening, the higher the stakes go. And that means more likely for both of you to get entrenched. And I ain't gonna go well. And so if that's how you start rebuilding that respect, is you start setting healthy boundaries. And so back to, like, what does it mean if your wife says that she needs space? So like I said, it means for some reason she feels unsafe around you or she's not attracted to you. But in a nutshell, another way to think about it is, it means she no longer values you. I mean, people don't get space from things that they value. They don't get space from things that they value. And so what do you do about it? What do you do about it? The best thing you can do is take 2 steps back. Do not pursue. Do not pursue. If you chase, she will run faster. Do not pursue. It will be a disaster if you do. And no, it's not some tactic or strategy for reverse psychology to, like, I mean, that can maybe kind of seem that way in hindsight, but it's not. If she's at this stage saying that she needs space, that's very often the sort of prologue to her leaving in a more permanent way. And so you don't want to do anything to accelerate that. You want to treat it as a fragile situation because it is. And this is actually a time when you should walk on eggshells. I don't mean letting her get away with things that are inappropriate or rude, but you should walk on eggshells in the sense that you want to be very, very careful with how you act, what you say, and what you do, which I guess is the same thing as how you act. And so what this means is you should be doing almost nothing. Nothing to chase her. Just let her be. Just let her be. And that might mean letting her be and continuing down the path of, like, hey, she's leaving. It might be. At some level, you need to refocus on you. This is all your responsibility. It's not your fault. Some of it's your fault. It's not all your fault, but it's all your responsibility, and you gotta just own it. If you want the marriage to work, then you gotta carry it. You gotta carry that weight. And it ain't heavy, but you can handle it. It'll be lonely. It'll be sad. You'll cry. You'll scream. You'll get angry. It's all good. You'll live. You'll live through it. And you'll be stronger afterwards. And so it's your responsibility, really, because you're a man. You should be leading the family. And if the situation is like this, then that means in some ways you failed. And hey, everybody fails at some point. All good. We just take it. We take it, and we learn from it, and we move on, and we incorporate, and we go on to the next thing. So what do? And again, you focus on, same as it ever was, focus on your fitness, your finances, your frame, and your faith. If you're on your fitness, I've talked about this, but in America, being overweight is obviously, it's a pandemic, It's a pandemic of overweightness. It's really bad. It's really bad for anybody to be overweight. So stop being overweight. And yeah, I know it's easy to say and not easy to do, but it is simple. Focus on your diet, focus on cardiovascular health, focus on strength training. Your finances, right? You got to level up. You got to make things better for yourself and your family. I won't say much more about that, but your frame. Here's the top tip. Here's a way to kind of take the temperature. If your wife is your best friend, then that's a problem. If your wife is your best friend, that's a problem. It's a problem because best friend relationships aren't sexual. They're not attractive. You know, there's not that tension of attraction in a best friend relationship. And it means that you probably never set a real boundary with her. And if she thinks that she can do whatever she wants to you or with you, then you don't really have a strong enough frame. Not yet. You just don't. And it also means something about the rest. I mean, why don't you have a better friend than your wife? And I don't say that in a shaming way or to shame you or anybody. I understand how difficult it is to maintain friendships. You know, as men get older, I see it a lot. I mean, I run a group with a lot of people and I talk to a lot of men. It's very common for men not to have friends. I don't think it's inevitable. I think it takes effort on, you know, your part, but it can be done. And it's healthy for you to have friends. And it's also going to help offset that problem of being attractive. Because if you have friends, you know, you got to go do stuff with them from time to time to maintain that relationship. And that means you're not around. And that gives your wife the opportunity to have some space without you and maybe even to miss you. But don't hold your breath, not yet. She's not going to miss you right away. If she's told you that she needs some space, you should not even be like holding on to that hope if she's going to miss you one day. Don't even go into that fairy tale romantic Hollywood stuff of like, you know, just tell me that you miss me or something. Just don't even go there. Suck it up. Get to work. Give her some space. Let time go by. Be calm, cool, and collected. Ciao.